Hello, welcome. How are you guys? Today I'm going to be talking about a three-part guided reading or small group reading instructional format that is super easy to use, that works for a variety of ages and simplifies the teacher's workload. So I'm glad you're here. I'm Marnie Ginsberg, and this is Reading Simplified, and it's our job at Reading Simplified to streamline classroom reading instruction and accelerate readers' achievement. So one way that we do that is by simplifying the structure of a lesson plan, because it doesn't have to be 1,000 different things. We don't have to choose from 1,000 different things. Really just 3 core activities in any session when you work with a group of students or one-on-one will cause their reading to accelerate. So we're going to talk about that today. So as we warm up, I'd like to know what this little question flying around here indicates. What is your biggest challenge with guided reading? Would you put that in the comments so I can react and respond to you? So I'd love to know, what is your biggest challenge with guided reading? And I have a link up above for a post that dives into this topic in more depth. So let me know what your challenge is in guided reading so that we can tailor this better to you. Okay, so thanks for tuning in. Again, we're talking about the 3-part structure for a guided reading format lesson, and a way of simplifying the bajillion things that a lot of other programs would have you do. For any beginning reader or any struggling reader, this will work for you. And before we dive in, I just wanted to say that, for many of us who have friends and family in Texas, this is not business as usual kind of time, and I'm praying for just the whole Houston, Corpus Christi area. I'm actually originally from the Corpus Christi area, and so I'm just saddened by all the things that are going on. I know many of you are watching and concerned as well, so we have a lot of folks in the Reading Simplified community that have Texas connection, so I bet they're not watching. They have many more important things to do right now, but I know you probably join me in saying that your thoughts and your prayers are with them, and so that is definitely something big that's going on right now. But if you have more business as usual right now and you want to talk about how to make your reading instruction easier this school year, then you're in the right place, because this is week 3 of our back to school boot camp. The first week we talked about blending and how to make blending sounds together to make words super easy, and we gave you a solution to solve any reader's challenge with blending. And then we talked about learning letter sounds last week, and now we're talking just about the whole structure. So let me show you my plan for how to make our guided reading lesson a lot easier. First, let me move some things around and then we'll get started. Okay, so this is it. 3 parts. It's super easy. You've probably done many of these things, and your small group reading instruction might look something like this, or might look exactly like it. Let me know if you do your reading instruction with a small group in this manner. I'd love to hear from you. Is this something that you have done or you do when you teach in a small group? But this is the structure that is something that is super efficient, and I have used it over and over again with beginning readers and struggling readers of any ages. I've worked most recently with a 4th grader and a kindergartner and a 15-year-old, and for all of them, they basically did this structure. So let me talk about it and how it's so powerful, what all it accomplishes, and how it will save you time so you don't have to recreate the wheel each day. You know, when you go to guided reading, you'll fit something into each of these 3 categories. So first of all, we start with rereading, and this is really important. It is taking the passage from yesterday that they did for guided reading and that they practiced yesterday in independent time or literacy centers, or listened to multiple times, so that when they come back to you the next day, whether it's the very next day or the next session you meet with them, they can read it pretty fluently. And what does that give you? Well, first of all, it gives you a great start to a lesson, because they should be confident and they should be motivated. And so starting on a high is a great way to start a lesson. It should also boost their decoding skills, because they have had to attack those words multiple times. You want to make sure that you're putting them in an environment where they've practiced accurately, and so that their decoding will have gotten better. Not only that, but of course their knowledge of high frequency words will have gotten better. They see the word I, they see the word there, they see the word goes. Maybe the book has the word goes in it 3 times and they read it once with you and then 3 times on their own. That's 4 times, and they come back to you the next day and they've read it 5 times. They've seen the word goes now 15 times. That's how you can boost high frequency word knowledge painlessly, and at the same time building motivation and confidence for reading books. So in general, I prefer to improve kids' high frequency word knowledge, not with flashcards or words in isolation, although there's definitely a place for that. But most of the benefit accrues from this rereading component. So that's a nice quick way to get started. And then the second thing that's really part of the magic of the Reading Simplified approach is the word work. And that is where we do multisensory activities, just a handful. Switch it, read it, and sort it are the most important. And those multisensory activities target a particular vowel sound that the student's working with at the time, and or a particular phonemic difficulty. So if the student is functioning with CVC words for blending and or manipulating, we would work there. Or if they're a lot higher and they could handle CCVCC words, we would work there. So that's how the same structure can vary based on the student's level. And one of the things that's really important about this word work component is that each activity does a whole bunch of things. So we don't do 3 minutes of letter sound in isolation, and 3 minutes of phonemic awareness, and then 3 minutes of reading words, and then 3 minutes of high frequency word flashcards. That just becomes a big mass of a jumble. It's just too much. So typically a word work session would involve 2, maybe 3 activities like switch it and read it. And that's all I would do, but I would have accomplished a lot with my students because each of those activities all together, are you ready for this? Let's see if we can get a lot of it. They would do left to right tracking, the concept of the alphabetic principle, phonemic segmentation, phonemic blending, phonemic manipulation, consonant knowledge, consonant digraph knowledge, short vowel knowledge, decoding sub-skills, or basically how to become a good decoder and how to become a good speller or encoder. So that's at least 10 things that you get out of just those 2 activities. And so then the word work, whatever you did for word work, would flow very smoothly into guided reading, because if you're targeting, say, CVC words, and the short A and the short O, you would then select a text for guided reading that has a lot of that pattern and that spelling or that structure. And so then for guided reading, what you do is you support the students to read the words in the books, taking turns probably. Maybe a student takes a turn for each page or each word if they're really starting at the beginning. And you support them, giving them word level feedback that is strategic in the sense that they are not being told the word, they're being told the one piece of information that they are not getting in order to be successful to attack the word. So then you give them that one little clue, and then they attack the word correctly, and so they have learned not just the word, but also they've improved their word attack strategy. So that's a big emphasis of the guided reading time. Plus, they're getting extra practice of the things that you did in word work, right? This part is not separate from guided reading. They're intertwined. And then finally, you end by asking them to summarize it, because you don't want them to think that reading is just about saying the words. And that's not likely to happen when you are there guiding them to figure out what the words mean, because they are searching for meaning and they've been given text that's within their reach. So they will be searching for meaning, and it will make sense to them in this context. And so that's it, 3 parts. I do it over and over again. And as a tutor now, privately, I don't have to think a lot before each lesson. I just know that I'm going to go through these steps, and I'll have covered a very comprehensive, balanced lesson for reading for anyone who's beginning or is struggling. Because if they're beginning in like K2 reading levels, or if they're struggling, by and large, their main issue is a decoding and word identification problem, sometimes fluency problem. All of those are addressed very aggressively with this framework. And then when kids become fluent, then you might morph into something slightly different with a bigger emphasis on reading more broadly, questioning, more writing. But for those K2 people or the kids who are behind, again, from any level, this is the format that I recommend. And it's just been a huge time saver for me. And the way it works, to even make it possible, excuse me, I'm losing my son. There we go. The way that it even works is that for so many different ages is that I think about this in just how to think about all these different levels of students as this one streamlined pathway. One page helps me think about where everyone is. They're somewhere along these different levels, and that's how I know what words to pick for or what sounds to focus on. And so I'm moving groups of kids up this progression, and that's how I'm able to figure out what each kid needs for each component of the guided reading session, whether it's rereading or word work or guided reading. And I see Diane's here. Thanks for popping in. I was asking earlier if you have any guided reading headaches. So if there's anything that occurs to you that bothers you about guided reading, let me know for Diane or for anyone who's here. So I don't want to take too much time right now to explain the streamlined pathway, but my point is just to emphasize that when you follow this kind of structure, like this 3-point guided reading structure, you can do it with multiple ages and multiple reading levels if you have a framework that is not oops, I'm clicking the wrong button. Sorry about that. Sorry. We'll get back to here. There we go. Is this right? So what my point was that instead of thinking of every student as needing a bajillion different things, if you can realize that each student or group of students that are similarly, their reading level is similar, then they fall somewhere along this framework, and you can move them up in a progression. So using this framework, these kids down here, they might get the short A and the short I, and they would get these high frequency words that correlate with that short A and short I. And kids further up would get the long O and high frequency words that are long O, or some other ones that just get thrown in. But that's how each group of kids gets their needs met within this structure that is predictable, making it easier on the teacher, but also getting a bigger bang for your buck. So one way to help think about this is with the streamlined pathway. Even though I'm not going to talk about it in depth, I do want to point out down below the first 4 levels, that's basic phonics, and that would include short vowels. And then above that is long vowels. And because of that break right there, we changed some activities slightly. So let me show you an example of that. So here is a guided reading lesson plan structure that I would use that expands that initial 3-part structure that I mentioned to you. Notice here is rereading for fluency, and then there are 4 choices for word work or word study, and then it ends with guided reading. So these first 2, build it and switch it, are particularly apt for the basic code. That's those short vowels. So when you're at that level on that chart I showed you earlier, then you would pick an activity like build it or switch it. And then you might also do read it, and then later on write it, but you only choose at the most 2 or 3 of these word work things. And then when your student is further along, then you would drop read it and do sort it, which emphasizes advanced code or advanced phonics, all those long vowels and all the tricky things like oo can be U-E and double O. So there's a slight tweak in the word work component. These are more focused on advanced phonics, but it's still here in the center. Switch it, sort it, write it, and search for it. It's still the word work component. We choose 2, maybe 3, once our students are comfortable, of these to help move them along with word work. Okay, are there any questions about this structure? I know I'm flying through some things that maybe some of you have never thought of in this way. And so when you are thinking about guided reading, oh, thanks, Anna. When you're thinking about guided reading, the reason that this little structure could even possibly work is that the word work activities integrate multiple reading sub-processes simultaneously. So if you've seen our switch in activity, that's an activity where the students move letter sound cards and they're encouraged to manipulate sounds and words. Let's switch sad to sat and sat to mat and mat to met. And so when they're doing that, they're doing a ton of different activities all together. And that's why I know you can not necessarily have to pull from 10 or 15 or 50 activities, but that one switch, it will do so much because it's integrating multiple reading sub-processes simultaneously. For instance, it does left to right tracking. It does the concept of the alphabetic principle, that our written language is a code for sounds. It just really exposes the children to that naturally. It does phonemic segmentation, phonemic manipulation, moving the sounds in and out, or substitution, if you call it that. And it teaches the letter sounds of all types, particularly the short vowels. And then, of course, it's doing decoding and spelling. So 7 different things with one activity. And that's how you can not necessarily have to run around like a chicken with your head cut off, pulling an activity for every subcomponent of reading. But if you have the 3 major components of a guided reading structure of rereading, word work, and guided reading, and then you have only a few word work activities to pull from because they give you a lot of power, then you are saving yourself some instructional time and some planning time. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I recommend looking for word work activities that do a lot of things simultaneously, not something just in isolation. The stuff in isolation, it can have a place and it can serve a function, but by and large, it's less efficient than when you do multiple things simultaneously. And then another principle that I'd like to encourage you to think about is that you would choose texts for guided reading that promote transfer of the target's skill. So if you're working on having your students learn the O sound in all of its spellings, the O in boat, the O in grow, the O in note, the O in toe, the O in, I don't know what I've left off, home, show, boat, all of those. There's a lot of them, right? A lot of programs will have us do word work activities and then read a book that is a leveled book based on letters of levels, like maybe the student is a level E, and the book might not have a 1 or 2 words that target the O sound. So will that skill transfer? Well, really slowly, right? But what if you have a book or a text where there are 5 or 10 or 20 words that target the O sound and they get that repetition? It will be a lot more likely that they'll transfer that. So for a season, when your students are learning to decode and learning to recognize words, which is usually most of K2, and for anyone who's struggling, who needs to kind of shore their sound symbol decoding back up, I encourage you to make sure that the text lines up with the sound that you're teaching, which is usually a vowel sound. So you're going to be teaching the short A, pick a short A text. You're going to be teaching all the short vowels and reviewing that. Pick some texts that have a lot of short vowels. You're emphasizing C, C, V, C words. In word work, pick a text that emphasizes that. So let me give you an example. So over here on the left is an example of a simple text for a beginning kindergartner who is working on the A sound, rather the short A sound. Okay, so ah. Notice how easy it is. I am Sam, I am Pam, I am, and the student puts his or her name in, and then Sam sat. It's 3 sounds or less. There's only a handful of letter sounds that the student's being exposed to, and there's an emphasis on the ah. In all these boxes, there's at least 1 and sometimes 2 short A words. So this kind of text will promote transfer. How many of you are already doing that type of thing where you're guided reading, at least for the time in which your students are working on their decoding, it aligns with your word study? That's a really big way to save some time. And then secondly, On the right, we have maybe the students are in your group are further along. They've kind of gotten some skill to short vowels and they're ready to go into advanced code, advanced phonics, and learn long vowels and other tricky vowel combinations. Well, maybe they do the sorted activity, which is one of the core word work activities we teach here at Reading Simplified. And then they would read O sound text that has a lot of opportunities to practice that pattern. We've got I am Joe, there's one O, and I am Joan, another O spelling. We both have soap, so there's two O spellings there. We cut the soap, we both have boats, two more spellings of O. We go, there's a different O. And we both float our boat, so there's three O's, and then there's three here. Go, boats, go. So notice what would happen if the student was reading that after they did sort it with you for word work. They would get that reinforcement of how to take that knowledge that you just exposed them to and practice it with real text. So it would transfer. And then if you followed their reading it with your support, with you reading it to them and they follow along, that will give them extra reinforcement of how to recognize the O spellings, but also how to recognize the high frequency words here. They'll see the word I and am and have and go. They'll before the end of the lesson today, if they read it once and you read it once to them, they'll have seen the word both 6 times. And then if they read it independently or listen to it or read it with a partner, then they'll read it maybe 18 or 24 times. And then they come back to you tomorrow for rereading for fluency, that first part of the 3-part guided reading structure that I recommend. They'll have read it maybe 30 times. So that's a way that you rapidly see your kids acquire word knowledge so that they can be successful. So even though a lot of the activities that we recommend at Reading Simplified early on are heavily emphasizing decoding, through the rereading element, they memorize words much more quickly than they would in other settings. So they become independent earlier. They get into chapter books earlier. And when they're into chapter books, then by and large, you've got your golden ticket. They're excited to read. They start reading books. They read series books, and they're off to the races. So that's how this one streamlined pathway kind of helps you think about all of your kiddos and moving them along rapidly up here to fluency. So as a review, remember, I'm really encouraging you to try a 3-part structure for your small group instructional sessions that includes rereading, word work, and guided reading. And make sure that those word work activities integrate multiple sub-processes simultaneously, like switch it, like read it. Here we have switch it and read it. Those are the 2 core activities when they're at the basic code level. And here we have switch it and sort it. Those are the 2 core word work activities when they're at the advanced phonics level. If you have any questions about what I've been talking about, or if you have a question or a concern about guided reading or small group reading instruction, I'd love to hear from you. So pop in and let me know. So this structure combined with these core activities, these word work activities, really save me a lot of planning time, and then they accelerate my students rapidly. Many students that I get to work with fall along this streamlined pathway, and they attack about 1 of these levels per week. And so in about 12 weeks, they typically can be at grade level or above in their word abilities and their passage comprehension. So I know it's a structure that works because I've used it with so many different kids for 20 years in so many different settings. Kids come to me by and large who are struggling and who have been labeled dyslexic or learning disabled or having ADD. And so they can be challenging with some mainstream instruction, but with this format, it's really not that hard. So Diane pops in with a good point. She says the sound-focused stories help the student practice the sound. For example, after a week of O sorting and reading, most kids get it. Yes, let me show you what she's talking about. She just popped in. So say you were at the advanced phonics level and you would do rereading at the beginning, and then you would do switch it and sort it, and you sort the O sound by its various spellings. OA words in one column, OW words in another column, etc. And then the student would read a new text like, let me show you, like this one here on the right. So they would practice sorting of the O sound in all of its spellings, and then they would read a text like this, Joe and Joan, where they are seeing several spellings of the target sound, and then they are reading it, and then they're rereading it, and then they do more sorted and another O sound page the next day. They do some more sorted and searching for the sound and a different O sound text the next day, and in a week your kids will recognize these spellings, the O in Joe, the O in Joan, the O in both and go, and also show and snow, and they'll recognize more of these high frequency words too. So that is how you can not only save yourself instructional and planning time, but you also save a lot of instruction time and move your kids along so that they don't have to be dependent on you for word attack for very long. They can quickly figure out how the code works because of the skills that you have given them. So are there any other questions or comments about guided reading? I'm just flying through this basic structure, which has served me so well. And it's not just me that has found this to be effective. Many new people in our Reading Simplified Academy are adopting this strategy, and they're using it in special education settings. They're using it in the classroom setting for kids of multiple ages. They're using it as mentors. They are grandparents and tutoring their struggling grandchildren. They are parents and teachers, and they're using it at home and at school. And this structure is very similar as well to a program that I developed at the University of North Carolina that has been studied in depth. And that structure was designed for struggling readers in kindergarten and first grade particularly. Some second grade teachers also used it. But those studies over and over again found that this approach got kids across the board in all reading measures to go up dramatically in all reading measures, including passage comprehension. In fact, in several studies, passage comprehension was the greatest gain. So you may be afraid when I'm talking a lot about decoding and word work and decodable text, you may think, oh, that's not really what is going to really help my kids. They need these higher level things, and definitely at some point they'll need the higher level things. But to become a really strong, fluent reader, you first have to get the groundwork laid. You have to have strong sound symbol matching and processing. And this framework, with a few activities that I recommend, like switch it, read it, and sort it, gets that done quickly. So I think it's time to sign off. Thanks for being here for Boot Camp Week 3. Next week will be our 4th week as we get rolling into the school year, whether we're about to start or we've already started. It's good to think about these core problems that we typically have at the beginning of the year, and so that's what we're doing. I look forward to seeing you next week on Tuesday, same time. We'll start about 8 o'clock Eastern. And if you want to know more about this guided reading structure and to get some of these freebies like this, if you want to see this or get a copy of this that you can use for lesson planning, go to the post link above and you'll be able to download that. So thanks for tuning in. Again, you're here with Reading Simplified, where we streamline classroom reading instruction and accelerate readers' achievement, and look forward to seeing you guys next Tuesday. Thanks for being here.